right, welcome everybody. We are so excited to be hosting our first ever City Bureau show on CAN TV. My name is Bettina Chang, and I'm a co-founder and executive editorial director at City Bureau. Today, we're going to be talking about the COVID-19 housing crisis, what's happening on the ground when it comes to renters, evictions, and what does shelter in place mean when you don't have a safe place to shelter? But before we get into that, just a quick introduction for those who are not familiar. City Bureau is a civic journalism lab serving Chicago's South and West Sides. Our mission is to get more people involved in committing acts of journalism. So we run several training programs, we host free events and give out paid assignments, in addition to producing these impactful stories about Chicago like the ones we're talking about today. So if you're interested, please check us out on the web. We are at citybureau.org or on facebook.com/citybureau. If you're on Twitter or Instagram, we are city_bureau to connect with our programs and get involved. And we actually just moved our offices from Woodlawn to Bronzeville, and we can't wait to open it to the public so we can keep building community with you all. All right, so we're going to go ahead and tackle this topic today about the COVID-19 housing crisis in Chicago. And to do that, I am happy to introduce these amazing journalists who have been part of our civic reporting programs at City Bureau. And earlier this year, we released The Housing Cliff, a series of articles, resources, and events about this housing crisis. So we're going to kick it off with Justin Agrelo. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, my name is Justin Agrelo. I'm a civic reporting resident here at City Bureau. The past year, I've been covering COVID-19's impacts on housing and development in the city, as well as the ongoing eviction crisis.
Thanks for joining us, Justin. And also with us today is Malik Jackson.
Hi, I'm Malik Jackson. I was a reporting fellow with City Bureau in the fall. I'm from South Shore. I was really interested in housing and development and was very excited to dig into this project.
Great, thanks, Malik. We've also got Natalie Frazier with us.
Hey everyone, I'm Natalie Frazier. I was also a City Bureau reporting fellow and worked with Justin on the Housing Cliff. Right now I'm doing freelance journalism, writing, and I am a West Side community member.
All right, glad to be on with you today, Natalie. And joining us also is Julia Woo-Jae Song.
Hi everyone, my name is Julia. I was also a reporting fellow on the housing team and worked with everyone. And I looked specifically also at the impact of COVID-19 on the housing situation of immigrants in the city, and I'm based in Uptown.
All right, and last but not least, we have Alex Arriaga here with us as well.
Hi, I'm Alex. I'm a civic reporting resident like Justin. I've been focusing on immigrant communities and civic participation, as well as how COVID-19 has impacted immigrant communities. And I worked with Julia on how that fits in with housing.
All right, well, thanks. Now that we've got the whole crew here, let's talk about the housing cliff. So Justin, starting with you, you led the reporting on housing and evictions at City Bureau in the past year. So what is the Housing Cliff project about?
So COVID-19 really had a huge impact on people's housing. Lots of people lost jobs. The eviction ban started last March, which has helped a lot of people stay housed. But what we learned through our reporting is that a lot of people were also still getting displaced, sort of in the shadows of the law. One of the tenants we spoke with, for example, for the story, was told by his landlord that the sheriff was going to come put his stuff on the street, which caused him and his family to move in a hurry to a small hotel. And they left behind valuable things, but that was a lie. The sheriff is not allowed to come and put people's stuff on the lawn right now because of the eviction ban. So yeah, we really learned that people, despite the moratorium, people were still getting displaced. The city and the state have offered housing assistance, but the demand was way more demand than supply of it. And this really has resulted in hundreds of people either being filed against or being displaced outside of the courts.
Mhm. Right. And one thing your team came across over and over again was that people tried to get help through these safety net systems, either through grants or some other form of money from the government, but a lot of people were falling through. So, Julia, what did you find in your reporting?
Yeah, I think Justin touched on this a little bit, but I think one thing we learned is that policies that are kind of like one size fits all, like the eviction moratoriums, do help a lot of people, but they miss a lot of people in practice. And I think that's the same with a lot of, the policies that we came across, and even, things like the grant programs that put the onus on tenants to kind of take action. And a lot of the people that we talked with had previous experiences of eviction, housing insecurity, and other traumas. And I think all of that just emphasizes the need for responses that addresses people's unique situations.
Mhm. Mhm. I want to turn to Malik because in a previous conversation, you mentioned that a lot of this housing crisis took place behind closed doors. So in this package, we actually describe it as Chicago's silent housing crisis. We know Chicagoans have struggled to pay the rent for a long time, whether it's because of this legacy of redlining, low and stagnant wages in the city, gentrification. There's so many other factors there. But the pandemic added this new element. Can you tell us more about that?
I like that you said that the pandemic added a new element, because it's not like these practices haven't happened previously, like the landlord and the tenant dynamic, but like the nature of the housing crisis, like as imposed by the pandemic, has really been happening in like a sort of like sinister and silent way, as we phrase it. And so like I saw that as we were conducting the project, through like evictions being filed without tenants even being aware, different landlords like threatening and encroaching upon tenants, and tenants not feeling like they can report on that or tell anyone about it because of the nature of the relationship, and feeling like if they told on their landlord, then everything would kind of spiral out of control. And then like there were some reports, or Chicago Reader did a report about like Cook County eviction court, for some of those cases that did end up going to court, literally going unrecorded, like unrecorded. So just the nature of it all is people don't know what's happening. And that's why I feel like this project was so important. And then like the other thing that I wanted to say is, like, you think about who this is happening to, it's majority low income people who don't have access to lawyers, people who may not really have the resources or the wherewithal to be able to even access the resources or the safety net programs that are being made available. And it's like there's no representation, which just really like reinforces why it was important for us to do this project.
Mhm. Definitely. The package, as it was published, the housing cliff features the voices of 7 renters who faced eviction or were somehow otherwise forced out of their homes. And these are really heavy stories. They were tough to tell, but important to tell, like you said, Malik, because we didn't want people to just look away from this crisis while there's so much else happening out there with COVID-19. Natalie, can you explain how we reached all of these people who, are dealing with so many things and might not necessarily have time to talk to a journalist like us?
Yeah, so dealing with like housing eviction is a super delicate subject. And I think we really tried our best to handle people and their stories with care. So we began by accessing public data. So eviction filings are public. So we just went and found that data, figured out, where people were living, what their situations were, and found their addresses. We actually made handwritten letters, just in an attempt to not scare people. A lot of information is just sort of bold type, letters from the city. And we really wanted to make sure folks knew we're trying to do a service, trying to help them, as well as, just inform them of what was going on. So we did handwritten letters, sent them out to over 400 folks who had evictions filed against them. And we immediately start getting letters back, start getting calls. Like Malik said, folks did not know that these things were happening to them. So we started this journalistic sort of project grounded in service, right? We wanted to let the people know what was happening to them, let them know it was wrong, and sort of figure out how to provide them with resources and information on how they could get out of those situations. So, we didn't just try to tell these stories, we tried to give folks, some information and some resources, to better their situations.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's one thing that City Bureau puts an emphasis on, is this community engagement when it comes to the reporting that we do. And if you're out there and you're looking for resources right now because you can't pay rent or you're having trouble with your landlord, highly recommend that you check out citybureau.org/resources. We have a whole list. It's the same list that our journalists here put together when they made those phone calls originally, around housing assistance, around legal aid, around how to organize a tenants union in case you need to, find a way to pressure your landlord. So check out citybureau.org/resources if you want access to that. We also have it available in Spanish. It's citybureau.org/vivienda. And so I'm going to throw it back to Malik here. What else stood out to you about this reporting process, and what did you learn from it?
So as someone coming into the fellowship program with a non-journalism background, I think the main thing that really stood out to me about the engagement process was just like the phrase, like the many different ways to skin a cat, but it's so much more than that. Natalie used the word delicate, because it is a delicate subject. Like if I would have had my own way and started at the beginning of this project, I just would have been like, oh yeah, like let's find out where they live, like let's knock on doors or let's call or something like that. But the intention behind like sending a letter, something that's like really chill, is something that I never would have really thought about. But like the intention and the spirit of doing something like that is really kind of the core tenet of community engagement.
Mm-hmm. And we owe all of you for spending hours handwriting notes to, I think, over 400 renters it was. All right. And so in addition to elevating the voices of these renters, we also wrote about the especially difficult situation that undocumented renters are in. So Alex, in the past year at City Bureau, you've reported on immigrant communities. Tell me more about how you and Julia reported this particular story, and more broadly, what does it mean to engage immigrants in the reporting process?
Yeah, from the beginning, since I began reporting with City Bureau on immigrant communities, I really learned how valuable it is to not only ask somebody to share their story who may be in a vulnerable situation, but maybe have something to offer, whether that's information about resources, as well as like translated information. So that's definitely something I learned, is how important it is to invest the resources and the time into reaching these communities in a non-extractive way. The housing team did a really good job with using direct letters. Working with Julia on this story, we really took the time to connect with immigrants who didn't speak English. Luckily, we both have other languages that we speak, but I've also worked with City Bureau through an interpreter. So it's always good to have those resources. And we make sure also to then reach these communities in the languages that they speak through translating stories and translating information about how they can access resources. And a lot of times, like Malik said, people don't even know that they qualify for some resources, especially, for example, if they're undocumented. So always trying to kind of offer them something that could support their situation.
Great, thank you for sharing that. And the housing clip package also included, in addition to the stories of the renters and also a story about undocumented renters, we had a story about proposed policy solutions along with that resource list. And we even just this week hosted 2 events to connect renters with the help they need. Justin, can you reflect on why we paired the stories of renters along with all the other components of this package?
Yeah, I think we as a team really thought about what it meant to be asking for people's stories in this moment. And it was really important for us to offer folks more than just a space to share their stories, but, given the severity of the crisis, and how emotionally laborious and traumatic it can be to share your story, a story of eviction. And as journalists, I think it's not always helpful to simply repeat people's problems back to them. I think we have a responsibility to offer folks or information that's relevant that they can use to navigate the world around them. And so, really, in this case, we decided that we wanted to offer folks places where they could get help and people that could offer them help a lot better than we can as journalists. And so I think that this project for me really highlighted the role that we as journalists can play in times of crisis.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And if you want to view this event, it is on City Bureau's Facebook page, and we are also broadcasting it on CanTV at a later date. So make sure you tune in. We were able to bring together legal experts, organizers, as well as officials from the City of Chicago's Housing Department to be able to answer people's very specific questions about what to do if they're having trouble with their landlord, their apartment, or paying rent. So this kind of worked like the housing cliff, where we created a whole package and worked really closely with folks who are undergoing housing security. It takes a lot of time and care. And, as has been mentioned a few times, it's a delicate topic. We're talking to folks who are in a tough situation. So Julia, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. I think the package as a whole, where we were talking directly with impacted people, as well as, including a resource guide and things like the explainer on the eviction moratorium, I think it became clear to me just how important it is to have time to both report on such an urgent topic, but also have time to come back and update that information, as people's situations were changing or as laws and policies were changing. And I think specifically by connecting with people over several months, we were able to offer, direct support in terms of just connecting them with information that, we knew about. But, like Alex and others have mentioned, that a lot of times people just don't hear about a lot of things because that kind of outreach isn't done to a lot of the communities that we report on. And so I think that is something that I'm grateful that we were able to do, and also something that does frustrate me that, we were the first kind of line of information for a lot of these folks.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And with such an evolving world too, not just looking at the way that eviction bans have changed or have been extended over the last year, but also with the Biden administration coming in and people feeling unsure about, whether or not they're going to get a stimulus check or get a housing grant. There's a lot that is evolving. And so definitely recommend folks to keep up with their local news if they want to be informed of what is changing, or stay in touch with your local community organizations as well. So as a partner in this reporting on undocumented renters, Alex, did you want to add anything here?
Yeah, I think definitely Julia was mentioning just building relationships with them over time and following along with what's going on in policy and how things are changing. And Bettina, you kind of mentioned keeping an eye on what's going on with organizations. So I guess that's one thing that we made sure to highlight in our reporting is ways that people do support one another, and organizations that can intervene, sometimes raise money to offer relief. Sometimes they offer, they build tenant unions, or sometimes like directly intervene in situations. So trying to show that the ways that people do fall through the cracks of government relief and institutions, but also knowing that there are people in Chicago who are looking out and working to push for better policy at the same time to directly give people relief.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I think that the theme for this past year was seeing how communities really band together to either create mutual aid networks or to connect folks with organizations that have been around a long time. One of the big resources that we did try to connect folks with in the reporting was a mutual aid group in their neighborhood, which, you know, if folks don't understand or have not heard of it before, I would definitely go to the website shycovid.org. We have a whole list of all the different mutual aid groups and other places where you can get resources at that website. So chicovid.org. All right, and so before we wrap up here, I do want to add, Natalie, during your fellowship, you also reported on affordable housing and how people might be able to access affordable apartments, along with the other reporting on eviction. So can you tell us a little bit more about that work and what you learned through that reporting?
Yeah, thanks, Bettina. Affordable housing in Chicago, specifically on the South and West sides, is super, super important to me and super personal, as I've spent a lot of time looking for that housing, especially in the neighborhood that I'm from, Austin. And just in that search and like the subsequent reporting on it, I learned that it's an incredibly bureaucratic system here in the city. You know, how they choose what developments, you know, have to have affordable housing, how they choose which renters get to rent those spaces, you know, just finding it, renting it, filing grievances, you know, even fighting mistreatment from your landlord. All of it is very difficult for your average tenant, you know, and usually favors landlords and owners. And I think we've seen that exacerbated in this COVID-19 crisis. So just, I learned that, you know, the affordable housing system in Chicago is super difficult and not necessarily transparent about, you know, about who it's serving. So it's a lot going on with affordable housing in the city, and not necessarily in the best way.
Yeah, and we all have to keep an eye on that as we go forward, as the city might be offering new housing grants, as folks, you know, the eviction bans that might end soon as the COVID crisis starts to wane. And so thank you for keeping your eye on that issue, Natalie, and thanks everyone for joining. So we're just gonna go ahead and start wrapping up here. Thanks to all of you for watching City Bureau's first CAN TV show. These journalists here with me today created the Housing Cliff Project, which was published earlier this month. It's available online at citybureau.org/thehousingcliff or citybureau.org/vivienda in Spanish. Our stories also appeared in Southside Weekly and Austin Weekly News and the Chicago Reader if you're looking for a print copy. So before we go, I want to make sure every person gets a chance to share any last thoughts about the project, the work that we're doing, and then also how you can keep in touch with them if you want to check out their future work. So Justin, can we start with you?
I'm currently finishing up my residency at City Bureau. I think I have one more story coming out that for our community healing series. And if you want to keep up with me, I have a website. It's just justinnegrello.com, and then it has all my socials and all my stories on there.
Great. Thanks, Justin. Next up, Malik.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, this project was an awesome experience for me. I truly did like learn a lot, not only just about housing in the city as it was playing out under COVID, but also just like I said earlier, just the many different ways to do these types of things. It was a very creative experience for me. Yeah, so I also write literature reviews for Southside Weekly. My most recent one was a book review, Halfway Home, Race Punishment and the Afterlife of Mass Incarceration by Dr. Reuben Miller. It's a very good book. You can find that on Southside Weekly's website, and I also post about it on my Twitter at Malik_X. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Malik. Next up, Natalie.
Yeah, so I'm still finishing up that personal piece, that personal essay on affordable housing in the city in my own search, which will be available through City Bureau's website. So just stay up to date with the Housing Cliff page, and you can find some of my upcoming work.
Great. Julia?
I am doing some freelance work and finishing up a few photo stories about how Black business owners and immigrant business owners both on the West Side and the North Side have been navigating the pandemic. And I think, definitely the type of reporting that we did at City Bureau, as well as just what we learned through the housing series, is informing a lot of that work. And then you can, I guess, keep up with that at my Twitter, which is at WJWOOJAEJSONG. Thanks.
Thanks, Julia. Alex?
Yeah, I'm so glad that I was able to collaborate with Julia and the housing team to tell the story about how immigrants are affected by the housing crisis. I think it's super important. I'm finishing my residency as well with City Bureau, so I'll definitely still be around. I recently did a freelance story on a group in Little Village that's fighting eviction. So you can find more of my work that I share on Twitter also at Alex Arriaga 2_.
Great. All right, well, that's it for us today. Again, my name is Bettina and I'm with City Bureau in Chicago. We are a nonprofit group bringing journalists and communities together to make more equitable, impactful journalism. If you want to get access to free trainings, paid assignments, awesome events, and workshops where you can meet other folks who care about their community and want to make a difference, just like these lovely people with me today, please check us out at citybureau.org or on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.